So I don't know. I was texting Peter like, why you not let us join your damn group? He's like, I don't know, man.
He knows.
We're live.
I finally did.
He knows.
We're live?
We're live.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Put it on me, Noah.
It's already on.
All right. Hello, beautiful people. It's great to be here with you this evening, and we've got a very, very special guest that I'm super excited about. This person is a former North Carolina Historian of the Year. He is the current director of the Bear Dark Sky Observatory at Mayland, and he is also the author of the new book, The Hidden History of the Toe River Valley. Mr. Michael C. Hardy, welcome.
Thank
How
you
are
very
you?
much.
Welcome, sir.
Great. How are you this evening?
Doing very good. Doing very good. We're stoked to have you in here because I was telling you before this started, this book I got a couple days from you and I skimmed through it. Granted, definitely not read the entire thing, but this book really kind of hits on all the stories that you've always heard growing up here, all the little stories and pieces of stories that you hear, the legends, the stuff. This really kind of sets the record straight on all those, and I want to commend you for putting together something like that. I think this is an invaluable resource.
Awesome. And I kind of hope you found something in there you had never heard before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because, you know, when you put something together like this, you have to have certain stories. You know, I would have gotten in trouble if I did not have said anything about Frankie Silver.
Sure. You have to.
Got
you
to.
know, I wanted to dig deeper and maybe give you some things that maybe you'd never heard before.
Right.
You know.
Well, and I think we found out even before just talking for a few minutes here that a lot of them are corrections to stories that you've heard before.
Right.
Or you find out that those are pieces of stories that people have put together, and it's almost like folklore. Tells what's the quote?
When the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
Right, exactly, and that's from the
man who shot Liberty Valance.
Gotcha.
Great film.
Oh yeah,
God,
for
it's
sure.
one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Well, Michael, before we get into the story, some of the stories in the book, and we definitely don't want to spoil it for the reader, but can you tell us where you came from, where you were born, how you got here, how you got into this profession, and just a general overview of you yourself?
Well, sure. You know, I often tell people I come from a mixed family. My mom is from the mountain south, and my dad is from the deep south.
Oh, okay.
So what do you do with rice? Is it in the morning with sugar, or is it in the evening?
Right.
You know, but I did grow up in the deep south and got bit by the history bug really early in my life. I was 10 years old, and I had an uncle come and pick me up and take me to a Civil War reenactment. And he bought me a hat, and he bought me a jacket, and I got to carry the flag.
Oh,
And
wow.
So
Nice.
I went home to my dad and said, Dad, this is the coolest thing ever. We have got to do this. And he agreed, and, you know, we would go to a few events, you know, every year, and that grew as I got older and could drive, and, you know, really my passion for history was really stoked as I got older, teenage years and into my 20s. But there's another part of that story. My parents took me to the library
Oh, okay.
and let me check out all of these books. And I was reading, you know, history books, especially Civil War history at that time period, from, you know, some of the foundational authors, Douglas Southall Freeman and Clifford Doughty and Bruce Catton and tons of folks like that. So not only was I, you know, out there running around in the woods on 2 or 3 weekends out of the year, you know, I was digging deep into the history part of this.
Yeah.
And learning and growing. Eventually went to University of Alabama and got a degree in history. And then in 1995, I got
Roll
married.
Tide.
That's right. Roll Tide.
Yay.
I got married in 95, and my wife had already been accepted to grad school at App State.
Oh, okay.
And so we moved up here in 95 and never left.
Yeah.
Tried really hard.
It holds you in, doesn't it?
Tried to get jobs and things in other places, but we never left. And so
This area is an enigma. It has a way of pulling you in
it does.
over time.
It very much
It
so.
really does.
So we moved. We lived in Boone till 2001. In 2001, we moved to Avery County, bought a house and moved to Avery County. And when she was in grad school, I'd go drop her off, and I'd go to the library and hang out. And I would stand there and I would look at the shelves. Now, App's not a big school.
Right.
They think it's a big school, but it's really not a big school. Their library is not the biggest
It's
library.
masquerading as a big one.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Even though you disagree with that on Saturday if there's a football game.
Right.
Oh, my
Absolutely.
But I was constantly astounded by how little is out there. And that's kind of one of the recurring themes of my life, especially the past 30 years, is trying to make history accessible to the general public. And I would stand there and I would look at the bookshelves and I'm like, well, there should be a book on this and there should be a book on that. And there wasn't. There was none of that stuff out there like that. And so I started to write. And I thought I knew a lot.
I can imagine.
I had read a bunch of books. I had, been to Gettysburg. And I thought I knew a lot. And so I, for my first book, picked a local Confederate regiment that fought in over 35 battles and skirmishes during the war. And I told the publisher that I would have it done in a year, it'd be 100,000 words. So 6 years later, at 155,000 words, I turned that manuscript in.
Wow.
And it's just gone from there. You know, I look around all over the place and I see so many holes in local history, regional history, state history. And I mostly write about North Carolina. Occasionally I'll do something different. But all of it, there are just so many holes, or it's just not accessible. So, you'll find a book on a subject, and that book was published in 1930, and most libraries don't have it anymore. And so it's not readily accessible. So that's what I do, is I try and find holes and gaps in our history and write about those areas.
God, there's got to be so many. I've had the pleasure of, there's several different people that we've had on here. Well, or I've talked about having on here soon, that have written books like this. And I often think to myself, especially when I go through the Arcadia series of books, the history of whatever. And I know everybody's seen the brown books. They always have the sepia cover or whatever. Every time I see those, I think to myself, you see them for around here about the Tow River Valley, about Spruce Pine, Mitchell County, Yancey County. How many stories are there how many histories are there just like that in every community and every town and every county in America, basically?
There's a lot of them, but I will say there's something interesting. I think because it's so old in the Appalachian, because it was really kind of like the first real people settlement. I mean, we had our colonies, all that stuff, but where people started like growing families, living lives, and generations began. They kind of got these mountains and stopped for a while, and the culture here is just so unique is the only word I can use to describe it. But I mean, everywhere does have a lot of history, but in this region, the Appalachians, and I'm biased obviously to Mitchell County, but I will say as a whole, the whole Appalachian region is so rich with history. And your point of holes in history, there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's interesting. And we'll come back to this later, but I do want to earmark this one thought. With all the media we have today, think how many holes in facts we're going to have 100 years from now.
Oh,
we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I don't want to distract us from this conversation, but
No, I was getting ready to add to that anyways, like talking about going to your point, how much history every community has, like ours. How much of that we hear today is historically accurate, if any of it?
Right.
and that's why we have this gentleman here with us, right? So,
So for my stories that I chose to put in this book, talking about historical accuracy, I give you where I found it. Whether
cite your sources.
Yeah, whether it's a newspaper article or a court record or the governor's papers or something.
God, that takes a lot of work.
I give you where I found it. Because, I mean, history is a story.
It is.
And some of it's true and some of it's not true and some of it's partially true. And there's a guy who wrote about Gettysburg named Thomas Derzonardo, and he said that there is no real story, no real history about Gettysburg. All we have are thousands of different people's opinions.
Right.
So if I'm reading a newspaper account, I'm reading somebody's opinion about what happened. If I'm reading a letter that somebody wrote from here to the governor, that's his opinion.
So it could be kind of like to interpret it, it'd be like a director's interpretation of a book when it becomes film, someone writing about whatever event happened, you're getting their interpretation of that event.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I wonder, do you have any sense? I can't remember what I was reading, but it was a newspaper account of the search for Elijah Mitchell's body.
Yes.
When he was lost or whatever.
Yes.
This article read like a Broadway play.
Yes.
It was so embellished, and the way that they wrote was so like the
Over the
bravado
top.
and over top
Yeah.
and all that. Do you have a sense of how, if that sort of writing style contributed to some of the sensationalized versions of stories that we see?
Yeah, to a degree, yes. When I teach a class on preserving local history and getting your local history, your community history out there. And one of the things I say is, with newspaper accounts and family stories, the truth is out there someplace.
Right.
We just have to find it.
I hate to
Yes.
interrupt here. I'm getting some weird
I hear it
noises
too.
on my
I know.
end.
I hear it too.
Really?
It's like a tea kettle sound is back, but then it was a high-pitched ringing noise.
It did this to us last time.
I found it.
I'm telling you, it's the Spirit of the Lord, guys.
I just moved my phone.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy.
It did this to us last time, though.
It did. I had my phone right here last time too.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good now.
Hooray.
Oh well. But
Sorry, y'all. Email.
yeah, so we were going back.
Oh, good, dude.
So we were going back to what I'd asked is about the way they wrote.
Well, I mean, they do write. They could write. Let me say it like that.
Right.
Even though sometimes it is sensationalism, they could write.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, I'm sorry if you're a journalism student out there today, but most of them can't write.
Yeah. True.
It's just not good stuff. And somebody 100 years from now, that's going to be the source that they have, and
Right.
they're going to struggle to make sense out of that source. Not that we don't struggle sometimes with
Right.
old sources as well, but yes, there is a lot of sensationalism to it. There still is today,
Oh, for sure.
but
I think everybody on Earth would benefit from an expository writing class.
yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So,
Remember, when I write something, I want to draw you in.
sure.
If I just give you the facts, this
Right.
took place on this date, and these people were involved.
It becomes work to read.
boring.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to. There's some sense of a necessity to do that to make it interesting to
Yes.
read.
Paint a
Yeah.
picture.
You have to paint a picture. And
Well,
boy, they were
history.
great at that back in the day.
History is a story. It's in the word history, and it should be told like a story.
Right.
I mean, yes, we should try and get all of our facts as correct as possible, but history's a story.
So the hidden history,
Yes.
and it's interesting. You mentioned the holes, and I can't help but notice the circle that looks like a hole on the cover of the book. I know it's a magnifying glass, but
Yes.
it's also it gives you that vibe of the hole. And I'm sure there's great examples, but pick a starting point with a hole in history that your book reveals. Pick any one. Pick one to start. We'll start us off with.
Formation of Mitchell County.
All right, perfect,
boom,
bingo. Let's
awesome.
hear it. So I love this already.
So, what's the story you've always heard?
Well, that it was a Union county, and Yancey County was a Confederate county.
Yep.
Yes.
And it was formed because it was a Union county.
Yes. That's the story everybody's heard.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's not true. 100%
Of course
not
it's
true.
Case closed. We can go home now.
The only thing true is that Mitchell County was created in February of 1861 of the story. And that's kind of really what got me digging into this. We were told, and it's been written for 100 years, that's how Mitchell County was formed. And in my brain, this is what's happening, okay? Counties in North Carolina, especially western North Carolina, are not formed overnight. It takes
Sure.
years to form one of those counties because the people down east don't like the people in the west.
Interesting.
Okay?
We've always been beholden to the eastern
I
part
was
of
going
the
to say,
state.
that still holds true today.
Yes, it does.
Yancey County took years to form. Watauga County took years to form. And so the common theme of that story is it happened just like that.
Right.
Okay? February
Definitely not true.
1861. And so I got to looking into that story and come to find out Yancey County, parent county, all of Toe River Valley, half of Madison County. Madison County is formed. And then about 1855, according to newspaper articles, local people are writing their elected representatives in the General Assembly, petitions and everything, and they are saying, look, we need a new county because this county is so big.
Right.
Okay? There's a paper trail for that. They actually wanted to call the original county Avery County.
Okay.
Okay?
And this, just to be clear, that included Yancey, Mitchell, and Avery.
Most of Avery.
Most of Avery.
Most
Okay.
of Avery.
All right.
So they wanted to call the original county Avery County. Of course, the Avery family, huge property owners along the North Toe River, both in present-day Avery County and present-day Mitchell County, huge property owners. That dies after about 2 years. And then in 1859, that bill is rebirthed, except not calling it Avery County. It's called Mitchell County because Professor Mitchell is fallen off the side of one of the blacks and died in the waterfall pool. And it takes 2 years from 1859 to February 1861 for them to finally say, yes, we're going to have a new county. So that whole idea that it was formed because it was pro-Union and Yancey County was pro-Confederate, 100% not true.
So completely no connection at all.
Completely no connection.
Not surprising, but I've always found it interesting that we end up being called Mitchell County when Mount Mitchell's over in Yancey County.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know, there's a Lenoir County named after General William Lenoir from Caldwell.
Yeah.
So-
So it just happens sometimes.
It just happens sometimes. But, you know, Mitchell was here. He visited the Sinkhole Mine.
Roan Mountain.
Roan Mountain,
Yeah.
Grandfather Mountain. I mean, he's over all of those places. So that is one of those things. And I have to back up and ask, well, how did that story get started? So Jason Deaton, who was 100 years ago very involved in local education, did his master's thesis, and it's called A History of the Toe River Valley to 1865. And he says that in there. And his history up until you get to about 1860 is really good and really good documented. And then when he gets to 1860 to 65 and those war years, he's just talking to people. He's not...
Because you were able to back then.
Yeah, but he's not digging into the paperwork,
Right.
you know, the existing
Interesting.
records. And so after that, along comes a book called Cabins in the Laurel.
Yep.
And Cabins in the Laurel says the exact same thing. Now, Deaton's thesis, you hardly ever would have encountered because, you know, it was published, part of it was published as an article in the North Carolina Historical Review, but everybody read Cabins in the Laurel.
Sure.
Local people hated that book.
That is absolutely true.
Really?
Oh yeah, because it made local people look backwards. The photographer that she used would actually tell people, go upstairs and get your grandma's clothes out of the trunk, and they would put them on, and they would come downstairs and take pictures of them wearing old clothes. And that's the version or the vision of the Toe River Valley in southern Appalachia that they wanted to portray.
Right.
Now, today, we look at Cabins in the Laurel and like, well, you know, there's some interesting things in there. But, you know, Cabins in the Laurel was published by UNC Press, and, you know, it had a national readership.
Right.
And
But
so,
to most mountain people, it was like an affront to their entire culture.
It was.
Wow.
Wow.
How many times does that happen throughout history?
With southern Appalachia, a ton.
A lot. I sort of
still-
get that.
It still does with YouTube now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's like, I hate to say it, but even like that, you know, that soft white underbelly, that Mark Latta,
Yeah.
you know, even the way that he portrays it, it somewhat makes it look way worse than it actually is.
Well, when your entire, like, everyone he interviews is either a meth addict, a prostitute, or someone, you know,
or
who is
somehow screwed up.
Yeah. And it doesn't paint a very good picture of the Appalachia.
No, it does
No,
not.
and of course there are those people here
Sure,
in Appalachia.
absolutely.
But, you know, there are, you know, tons of great middle-class people and, you know, just hardworking, honest people,
and smart people,
who live in good houses, you know, and that's, I mean, look at and we talked about this briefly earlier, look at the Bakersville Riot. You know, we were deemed the bloodiest county in all of the United States. There had not been a worse killing since Custer at Little Bighorn.
Wow. So that story is where that whole moniker comes from.
Yes.
Like where like this is the most violent, wild backwoods county in America.
And it's all because of Bakersville.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes. And come to find out, that event never happened. A guy made that up trying to get a job for a newspaper. And the event never happened. There never was a riot.
So there never was a shootout over moonshine.
There are plenty of shootouts over moonshine.
Right, sure.
But not, you know,
every week still
involving 300 people or whatever.
Yeah, you know, not storming the jail in you know, Bakersville and hauling that guy out, and you know, no, that never happened.
Wow,
that's crazy.
I can't say that I'm surprised.
Well, while we're on that subject, I want to ask you something about the Civil War after this. But while we're on the riot subject, the Spruce Pine Riot.
Yeah.
So the story, the way I've always heard it, and I think most people probably have, is it was a racially motivated riot by some blacks that were working on the railroad. One of them raped a white lady, and then the townspeople basically killed them all and buried them next to the railroad tracks. Yeah. That's not true either.
No, that was partially true.
Right.
The first part of that was true. And it's really rather unjust, but road crews and railroad crews would hire convicts to come and bring cheap labor in. And it's really unjust because you could be a black man in some city or town down east and be perceived as loitering, and they would arrest you, and the judge would convict you 6 months or whatever, so they could hire you out to these road crews. So that's totally wrong.
Wow, it was a revenue stream. So they would go find people to break laws, so they'd have a labor force.
Yeah.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
It's like the prison industrial complex has been a thing for a while.
For a long time.
A cheap labor source.
Yeah,
very cheap labor.
So that part is all true. And there were different camps, both for convicts, and sometimes they would bring in other folks to work on different parts of the roads or the railroads. But it was a problem because, you know, some of these men were criminals. They would escape off of these out of these camps. They would steal clothes, steal food, steal cars, whatever. And you know, the local people were kind of tired of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so here we have this man who's in this convict camp, and he walks off and attacks this white woman and escapes off the mountain. They eventually catch him about 3 days later in Hickory. Local people get together, local men get together. They go to a couple of the different convict camps and work camps, and they basically round up all of the folks in those camps, flag down a train, put them on the train, and some of them go into Tennessee. There's more than one train. Some go to Tennessee and some go into South Carolina. But there never was violence. Nobody was ever killed. Nothing was burned. Nobody was beaten up. There's even one story that says that these men were actually given time to pack their belongings before they were marched to the train, the station in Spruce Pine, and put on the train and sent out of town.
When you say flag down the train, you mean they stood in the railroad tracks and forced them to stop?
Well, I mean, the train probably would have stopped anyway.
Right.
But yes, when the train stopped, they said,
"Get on it,
get on it, and get out."
Yes. So, of course, the governor was notified, and, you know, there was a riot, and so the governor would send in the National Guard, and the National Guard gets here, and the commander says, well, you know, there are some people who are upset, but there's really not anything going on.
Right.
And so the National Guard would stay for a while. The man was caught down below Hickory, or in Hickory. Fastest trial ever. The governor within like 6 weeks is reordering the local court schedule so they can get this guy tried. He is taken to the prison in Raleigh, and then when the time for the trial comes, they bring him back by train, and National Guard is here. They escort him. The trial lasts about half a day, and he is found guilty, and rape is executionable crime.
At that point.
Point. And so he is executed a couple of months later for the crime.
Well, here, while we're on this subject, hard question.
Yes.
Do we have a racist past here, historically?
That's yes and no. I mean, there have never been a lot of, if we're talking about African Americans, there have never been a lot of them here. There never was. And, typically, I don't think most people today are racist, per se.
Sure. Yeah.
If I see somebody that needs help, I'm going to stop.
Sure, 100%.
And that's just human nature. It's how I was raised, my Christian upbringing.
Yeah.
And was it worse 100 years ago?
Probably about as much as it was worse across the country.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think, the South is being racist. I mean, the whole United States, we could go into the black codes prior to the Civil War where if you were a free black man, you could not move up north. They would whip you and put you in jail. That was just the laws on the books at that point in time.
So there was an effort to keep blacks out of the North.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
Just keep them in the South.
Yes.
So the North wasn't this
it was not
safe
utopia.
haven, utopia.
That's
for
why they went to
freed slaves.
Canada.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then we could push that story forward. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about the racial riots in places like Detroit during World War II. And of course 60s there were tons of race riots, both up north and out west. So that is a problem across the board. But I think in a lot of cases it's not like what it was in the 60s or the 50s in some other place. And maybe I'm accustomed to living here. I've lived here almost 30 years, and if I see somebody stopped on the side of the road, I'm going to try and help.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, keeping along those same lines, I've always wondered what the real, because we didn't have a lot of African Americans, slavery was not really a thing around here for the most part. Maybe indentured servitude and things like that.
There are a handful of slaves, especially in this end of Mitchell County and in the lower end of what's now Avery. Strange enough about that's comment right there. Had Avery County existed in 1860, the largest slave-owning family would have been the Banners.
Really?
And they owned like 17 slaves, but almost all of the Banner young men went over the mountain and fought for the Union early on. Not late war stuff.
Interesting.
So history is a complex
It's almost like there's nuance to things.
Nuanced,
It's crazy.
yeah.
It's crazy.
And nuance is completely not a thing nowadays.
No.
It's a knee-jerk reaction to
You got
knee-jerk
it.
reaction.
Black
Absolutely.
and white, everything is just you're here, and no in between.
Right. Exactly. So just in terms of the Civil War in general, is there any truth to the Union versus Confederate counties around here? Is that a thing at all?
No.
Okay.
So I have a really good friend, Mike Ledford, lives in Burnsville, and he and I, for the past, 15 years or so, have been working on a roster of local soldiers based upon the 1860 census. We have taken everybody out of the 1860 census, male between like ages 10 and 50 or 55, and tried to figure out where they went and when they went and who stayed at home and who hid out. And I'd like to say we're close to being done.
Wow. What an
But-
accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's mostly a wintertime project.
Right.
Because it's too cold to get out and do anything.
Right.
But I can tell you that whole idea about Mitchell County being formed because it was more pro-Union than the Yancey, there were more federal soldiers from Yancey County than Mitchell.
Okay.
And you can look at that and see where these pockets of unionism are. Now, another thing along those lines, just because your ancestor was in the Union Army does not mean he was a Unionist. Mm-hmm. There are a bunch of these fellows who, William Moore is one of them from Burnsville. He doesn't cross over until like March of 1865.
So you're well into the war.
Well, I mean, the war ends 2 months later.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So where is his unionism?
Right.
You know, he's not going across the mountain. And he actually takes like 25 or 30 guys with him, and they join a group called the 3rd North Carolina Mounted U.S. Well, they're not joining to preserve the Union, and they're not joining to free the slaves. They're joining because they've realized who has won the war, and they're going to get a pension.
Right. Yeah, I started to ask if it was a monetary thing. Yeah.
They're
It's
gonna
always
get
monetary.
It's always look at the money, right?
So the group of people that does not get included, or if they do included, they're called Unionists, are the dissidents. Mm-hmm. They don't care about the Confederate government, and they don't care about the Union government. They're good mountain people. We just want to be left alone.
Right.
Y'all They're the Swiss of the whole thing, basically, right?
And so, I mean, there are hundreds of men from the Toad River Valley who don't join either army.
Wow.
Even though the Union Army is right over that mountain, and they pay good money.
They just want to be left alone.
They just want to be left alone.
Boy, that persists, that mentality here today. We're losing that.
It does, yeah.
We're losing that. But I think it's an important part of our of Appalachian culture is that you love everybody, you'll help anybody, but you just want to be alone with your family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You want, and
let's do our thing.
It's a limited liability kind of thing. It's not malicious. It's not against anyone else. It's just like, cool, see you over there. Hey, how you doing?
Right.
Just, you see that fence post or that tree? Stay on the other side of it. We're cool. Yeah. Now, if you come over here, let me know you're coming. Be a good neighbor,
stay over there.
That's right. If you need something, ask. I'll help you. But don't take nothing.
Right.
Like a good neighbor, stay over there.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you see fights going on around you, like, my name's Bennett and I ain't in it,
Right. So I think that persists well before that. I mean, I remember I just recently rewatched the history of the Revolutionary War, the History Channel series, and I can't remember. It was after the Battle of Charleston. One of the British general, the horseback. What's his name? You know,
Lord Cornwallis.
Yes,
yeah,
I believe so. Started chasing some members of the Revolutionary Army up, and they intentionally went into like Western North Carolina, Western South Carolina, that place, and they said that basically they chased them that far, and everybody was so crazy that they were basically like, this is a bunch of bullshit, turned around and left.
Yeah.
And it was because that people just wanted to be left alone. It was not, they didn't have there was no dog in this fight for them.
Yeah.
Would you say that overall in general, that's kind of the theme of the Revolutionary War and the Civil War in these mountains?
Well, so in a broad picture, when you talk about the Revolutionary War, there were a third of the people who were patriots, a third who were loyalists, and a third who just wanted to be left alone. Now, that's kind of a general statement, but that's a statement that we often repeat. The guy you're probably talking about is Patrick Ferguson.
Believe that was it, yes.
Oh, he was under Lord Cornwallis.
Yes.
Cornwallis was the overall commander. And I talk a little bit about that in the book because talk a little bit about the Revolutionary War. Now, you'll get notes about this. There's really no record of anybody really living in the Toad River Valley in the Revolutionary War time period. And some folks will say, my ancestors have been here since the 1750s. Right. Well, here's the problem with that. In 1776, the Cherokee, who were backed by the British, come through and burn out everybody that they can find. Okay?
All the white men.
All the white men. They kill them. They scalp them. Arthur McFall's wife was scalped. There's another lady who was scalped and lived.
Wow.
So he divorced her over that too.
What a terrible dude.
I know.
God.
Some of your folks may be related to him because he's buried right up the road.
We'll come back to that earmarked. I'll hear more about that.
So we have on the other side of the mountain, we have the Watauga settlement, Sycamore Shoals, the Watauga Association. Long history there, not long history, 1760s. But they would slip off the mountain and they would come down what we call Bright's Trace or the Old Yellow Mountain Road. And they would go join the Patriot Army and fight at times, and then they would be released and they would come back. They were at Charleston, the siege of Charleston. Ferguson got tired of that. And he sent a note saying that if the militia along the Watauga and the Nolichucky and the Holston did not surrender, that Ferguson would march his forces over the mountains, lay waste to their homes, kill their families, burn their farms, and that would be the end of that. So the Patriot leaders over there got wind of that, called on the militias from Virginia, the Abington area, called on Benjamin Cleveland and that group from Surrey and Wilkes County, some of my people over there with him.
Gotcha.
And they got together and they left. Now, the Surrey Wilkes people did not go to Sycamore Shoals, but the Abington militia, the Virginia militia did. And they got together and they went and found Ferguson, a little place called Kings Mountain. If you've ever been there, it's not much of a mountain. It's a little hill. But they went to Kings Mountain and totally annihilated the British force.
And that was the Over-Mountain Men.
That's the Over-Mountain Men, Battle of Kings Mountain.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson said that was the turning point of the American Revolution.
Wow.
Is that battle right there.
So we just went down there and just unloaded a pound of country whoop ass on them, huh?
We did.
That's awesome.
We killed Ferguson. We killed one of Ferguson's girlfriends. One of his other girlfriends escaped. And we
Ferguson
captured...
was a player.
He sure was. And we killed or captured all of the Loyalist force. Now, they're not British regulars.
Right. These are loyalists.
These are people from South Carolina. There was, I think, some New Jersey soldiers there as well. But they're Americans. They're not British, even though we're all British at the start.
Sure.
And that changed the course of the American Revolution. Cornwallis says, he was in Charlotte at the time, and he says, I don't need to stay here. So he goes back into South Carolina for a while, and then he eventually goes to Guilford Courthouse, which he wins that battle, but he burns his wagons trying to make speed, and he eventually will go to Yorktown, where he's trapped between the French fleet and the Patriot forces.
And he's forced to surrender.
Wow. So, but that's part of our history,
right?
Because the Over-Mountain Men came down that more or less 19E. The point that they crossed is called Yellow Mountain Gap. It was the highest point of the American Revolution, like literally in elevation, the highest point. And they came down Roaring Creek, simplified terms, and continued on down to they camped one night over here where the golf course is. And continued on south from there.
Didn't they just have the Over the Mountain Men reenactment out at the Gym Museum last week or weekend before?
The weekend before.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And so they're a group, and I'm actually a member of this group, the Over Mountain Victory Trail group. They are going through. They're actually doing the march right now. They were doing an event yesterday.
Yeah, we had one at Sabelco.
Yes. How many school groups did you have?
There were 500 students there.
Okay.
Wow.
Insane.
But,
it was ridiculous.
And they will
a lot of kids.
That's encouraging, actually.
Yeah.
Continue to work their way down to Kings Mountain. And they're doing school groups and they're doing community programs, this group, every single day for almost the next 2 weeks.
That's critical. But you mentioned Ferguson. I want to interrupt quickly because we had a question come in on the feed, and you may or may not know anything about this, but he says there's an this gentleman's from Knoxville, this urban legend in Tennessee that a descendant of the Over-Mountain Men in Morristown, Tennessee, owns Ferguson's personal rifle. Do you know anything about that? To be true or not?
I can't say that's true or not. Ferguson had designed this breech-loading rifle where the trigger guard unscrewed, like you'd unscrew it down and it would drop the breech down, and you could load it that way instead of traditional muzzle loading. And I don't know where the original one is or not.
Got it.
But it was kind of a unique thing.
Oh, it was very unique.
Right.
But there are probably more than one because
Right.
he was trying to get the British government to buy them.
Right. Gotcha.
So I got a question going back to your point earlier that we're all British from the start. At what point did we lose our British accents and start to develop into our?
I will tell you, there are some folks around here, more on the Tennessee side for some reason, that have more of a British sound to their accent still to this day.
Yeah.
In pockets of Elizabethton, kind of back through Hampton that way. There are places that still kind of have. But
the reason I asked that is because I've always heard that our dialect here in Appalachia, in Mountain Appalachia, is the closest to.
It was,
Yeah.
and you can occasionally still hear people. I've got a good friend who lives up above Kona, and he sounds.
you know the name Kona, where it comes from, right?
It's from the minerals, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you go online and look up old videos of Ray Hicks from Beach Mountain, the storyteller, and his nephew Orville, you can still hear that a little bit, but thanks to TV,
Yeah.
TV and internet's
waned
killing
out.
our accents.
Yeah.
it's hard to hear. Even
mean-
a Southern accent, TV is just.
I was so happy.
Yeah.
I was at my corporate office in Minneapolis a couple weeks back, and I was just in there with customers, and all of a sudden someone said, one of our workers from there in our facility said, "Hey," he just said, "Hey, are you from the South?" And I said, "What gave that away?" He's like, "I'm guessing you're from the Appalachian Mountains, probably North Carolina or East Tennessee." And I said, "Yeah, I'm most definitely a kind of both."
Yeah.
I went to college at East Tennessee and grew up here, but it's neat to still hear it. And I try to church it up for years professionally in business because people do treat you different.
Yes, they do.
Oh yeah.
They treat you different if you talk the way we talk.
Yeah.
And for years, I was a DJ for many years and musician. I tried to hide my accent for decades. And one day, when I started coming back home and realizing that it was disappearing, I was like, I'm not hiding this anymore. This is what it is.
Screw
Yeah.
that.
And as I get tired or as the night goes on, it gets longer and thicker.
Yeah.
You know. But I love our accent, and it's and you might be able to correct this, but my understanding, I mean, we got a lot of Scottish, Irish, English, kind of the mix ended up
A
being
lot of Germans.
a lot of German.
Yeah.
A lot of German.
Most of my family, a lot of my family's grind staff, so
Yeah.
it's very German.
Well, I think David in the chat there makes a good point. I think maybe what you're trying to say is it's not even necessarily so much British as it is like that old English
Yes.
type of thing, which I guess is a British thing.
Well, I've
but-
always heard British, so
Yeah.
that's why.
Well, we used to have, my mom and dad had the Pine Bridge Inn when it was open back in the day. And we had one of the longest standing every year groups that we had was a group from Oxford University that would come here. They were linguistic students that would come here and stay, and they would go and interview, Ray Hicks and all those types,
Right.
and just generally get it, because this is the last basically place on earth where that old English type of dialect exists, And it's really interesting. It really is. And what's so interesting to me too is that how as you move down, like even out into the foothills and then down into like Charlotte, where you start to develop that more of that deep South, the molasses is pouring out of your mouth, which is a great way to.
Yeah.
Like
North
light is
Carolina.
Loit.
Yeah.
Turn the lights off. That's more of
Yeah.
a Piedmont kind of accent. Yeah, it is neat.
But North Carolina has a rich history of linguistics. And are you familiar with the island? I don't think it's Ocracoke. I think it's another island that has its own specific.
Well, there are several of them. There's
Right.
one island out there that has this group of African Americans on it,
Oh, the
and they speak
Gullah.
Gullah. That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they speak their accent, and you can still find a Southern accent. Go to Louisiana, and that's a totally different.
Creole is a whole
Right.
different
Southern
animal.
accent.
Yeah.
It is.
But we. And Tidewater, Virginia is different, and Charleston is
Sure.
very different. But we're losing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I think about some of the things that my grandmother said. She was born in Wise County, Virginia, and I think about the way that she said certain words.
Like the way some people say chimney.
Yeah, Chimley.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of your older folks will still sound like that, but
Yeah,
it will be gone.
I know.
My
which is
grandmother
sad.
always said, "Wash your hands, wash."
Wash your
yeah.
hands. Yeah. They there's somewhere online. There's a YouTube video. I've got to go back and find this because I reference it all the time. But there is like a 3-hour long YouTube video of a guy that goes through every single regional dialect in America. He is he's a guy that teaches like movie stars and things how to speak in certain accents or dialects. He's a linguist. Yeah, that's what he does, and he goes through it one by one and breaks it down regionally, and talks about it, speaks about each one of them for probably about 5-10 minutes. But I mean, it is an exhaustive video, and I remember thinking, man, the work that this guy went through to put something like that together, it's incredible. I'll have to find it and send it to you guys. It's an awesome.
So, just I love your approach to the book and what you've done here, and you said a couple interesting things, like the comment about us getting notes about people weren't here in the Revolutionary Wars. Besides the Cherokee, most likely going to murder you, but winters were harsh here.
Oh yeah,
back
so
then.
we got the little mini ice age going on.
Exactly.
In that time period, it's slowly coming to an end. 1780s, 1790s. But the Cherokee didn't even live here.
No one did. Everybody moved to warmer ground.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that I discuss a lot is, everybody wants to be related to a Cherokee princess.
I know.
And first of all,
everybody's a quarter Cherokee.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody.
Well,
this
it's
is
like there's money involved.
Yeah.
Not me.
This is much more Catawba ground than it was Cherokee. But honestly, it's kind of this in-between area between the Cherokee, the Catawba, and the Shawnee. And they will come and hang out for the summer, and they will hunt, or they will go they'll go on a raiding party. So when William Linville is killed in 1766, I think it was, the newspaper said it was a northern band of Indians. It's not a western band, which would be Cherokee. It's not the Catawba. So it's probably Shawnees
up
that
there.
are down here on a hunting trip, and they run into the Linvilles and kill them. So this Toe River Valley area, there's no villages, permanent villages or anything that there is any historical record to back up. And I run into that all the time. Somebody will say, well, my whatever was Cherokee. My great-great-grandmother was Cherokee. And I said, well, for that really to happen, then your great-great-great whatever grandfather probably brought her back in the 1830s with the Cherokee Indian removal, because there were local men involved in that.
Sure.
I don't talk about that in the book.
It's a whole other
Probably
thing.
brought her back, for that to really be Cherokee, because this is not Cherokee land. And I know people are probably going to send you notes and say that they found an arrowhead in their backyard, and there were villages here. If you go back, if a lot of the archaeological sites, they date back to 1100, 1200, 1300, and then we get the mini ice age, and that ends.
Right.
So the artifacts they're finding are actually way older than what they think.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's even cooler in my book.
Yes.
So it's interesting about the Toe River Valley. The Toe River starts as this little trickle off the backside of Sugar Mountain. Just kind of rolls down all the way through here.
A little trickle off the Blacks.
Exactly. Runs into it and kind of starts bringing this together. So what put Toe River Valley on the map?
We're on the map.
Valid point.
On Google Maps, if you zoom in far enough, eventually you'll start to see the names. You know what I mean?
That's a valid point. You know, and I kind of want to keep it that way.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, I have an answer for that.
Sweet.
Micah.
That was going to be Michael. The mining was the draw for
Micah.
And is that what brought the train here too?
I know where I think you're going with this.
Not really. I mean, They were for the train, like the Clinch Field and that route.
It's just a pass. They had to get through it.
They were looking for a way to get from the coal fields of Southwest Virginia and Eastern Kentucky to the Eastern Seaboard.
Get the coast.
And that's a more direct route, the most direct route. Even though if you look at all them tunnels, it doesn't seem very direct.
Right.
That was the most direct route. But it's really the Micah in a variety of ways. Now, pre-Civil War years, local people would use mica for window panes in their houses and stuff. Post-Civil War years, they start using it in wood-burning stoves and coal-fired stoves because it's very heat-resistant.
Yeah.
They'll use it in lanterns and lights and things. But it's when Thomas Edison invents that electric motor.
Needs mica.
He needs mica because of its qualities and
the gears and stuff, right?
That's really well. It has a ton of uses, but it's there with the Edison and the electric motor that it really starts to take off. Now, mica, of course, is up and down.
Thank you, Edison, for everything.
Yeah.
When we get to the 1930s. Local mica production has really dwindled. It's cheaper to get it from India than it is to dig it out of our own ground.
Really?
World War II comes along. We can't dig it out of India because we got this whole war thing going on. There were over 700 mica mines in the Tow River Valley. I've got
700?
Yeah.
I'd love to see that map.
I've got a 1965 map. You can find it online.
Good to know.
And that's probably not even all of them, but those are just the ones that are documented. And I mean, these mica mines are crucial for us winning World War II. I mean, extremely crucial for us winning World War II, because all of our bombers and fighters,
motors that are in a lot of things.
That's right. They've all got to have that local mica, and so. That's what puts us on the map. And we continue to mine mica through the 60s. And then, once again, it becomes cheaper to get it from overseas.
Right.
Wow. Spruce Pine saves World War II, confirmed.
Yep.
So I heard the story that Hernando de Soto came here because he encountered an Indian princess that had a wardrobe on that was built that was done with mica, and it shimmered or whatever. And he was like, "Need to know where you got that? Show me where you got that. Is that true? Is there anything to that?"
Hernando de Soto came through here is true.
Okay.
Indian princess. They didn't have princesses.
Sure.
Oh, come on now. I've seen Pocahontas, Disney's movie. Come on now.
He was not after mica.
Okay.
He was after gold and silver.
Sure.
So the traditional route right now, Tim Silver wrote about this in his book about Mount Mitchell, is that he came up through Pinola and would cross the Tow River, probably more than once, and continued on up into Tennessee and eventually made his way to Mississippi River where he died. So that is true.
So he died.
Yeah, he died. He didn't make it. They floated him down, buried him in the Tennessee River. Mississippi River.
I hope Peter Franklin's on the podcast tonight. Peter, if you're on here, drop a note about the gold mine, the lost gold mine of Houdow. So,
there are a lot of gold. Gold mines on Grandfather Mountain.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And it's too expensive to extract the gold.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Gold mines.
Here's another mine that they
both sides of Grandfather Mountain.
I found this out a couple years back. Asbestos mines.
Oh yeah. So we mined a ton of stuff. Iron ore in Cranberry, mica from Cranberry to Yancey County. In fact, there's a mica mine. I think it's the Ray mine on Mount Mitchell in the Blacks. That's like 5,000 feet. The shaft is 5,000 up elevation. So there are tons of mica mines. We mined emeralds, asbestos, lead, gold, silver.
Yeah.
Talcum. It's so funny. I grew up out the very end of Deer Park Lake Road, almost really more Penland than Deer Park where I grew up. And a lot of mines out Deer Park, of course. When I would bring friends, and I still do, from all over the world here, they're amazed by the sparkling soil.
Yes.
And if you drive out Deer Park, still this day, and go out to the cemetery, the ground when you're driving up there, if the sun's overhead, it just sparkles, and it just blows people's mind when they're not familiar. Like, why is the ground sparkling?
Yes.
You know,
It's everywhere.
I
It
just
is
tell them, I was like,
everywhere.
yeah, the gold's so abundant here in silver, it's just everywhere, and watch them jump out of the truck. And
There's a picture of my grandmother worked at the Micah house over there in town.
Yes.
And there's a picture somewhere. There's one of her and one of her friends that were working there that they always display at like the Maryland Gym Festival or whatever. But somewhere I've seen one. There is one with them standing beside a Micah sheet that is probably 6 foot long and probably 7 feet high. I mean, it's huge.
it's an amazing substance.
It
I mean,
really is. When you think about it, it is wholly unique.
all of us at this table have probably made sunglasses when we were kids out of pieces of mica at some point in your life. I mean, it's such an amazing substance.
I
So
actually have a story about Micah.
jump in here.
I remember this is a very specific moment. I'm trying to remember. I used to live up in Bandana, like deep in Bakersville. And I would remember I'd walk outside, me being a little kid, and there's Micah literally everywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, I would go pick up just little chunks of it, not knowing what it was. Be like, oh, what's this shiny thing? Literally everywhere. It is
Oh, yeah.
so common.
Especially when you get up in the higher parts and stuff like
I
that.
will
You can
tell
find them
you-
sticking out of the ground.
Yep.
Had I been as entrepreneurial at a young age as I am now, I'd have been selling mica in Florida as fool's gold every day of the week.
Right.
Every day of the week. So back to, your Toe River Valley. I know you're from the area, but what specifically about Toe River history just called you to write this book? Or just all of it? Like what?
All of it.
Just so much of it?
So much of it. So, as I said earlier, getting history into the hands of people.
God, I love that.
My
That
night-
should be a T-shirt.
It should be. My night job, working at the observatory. We get lists of people who our guests are at night, and I'll look over that list, and there won't be anybody from here
Right.
on that list. And I'll ask, where are you from? Burnsville. I'm like, not with that name.
Yeah.
And of course,
Exactly.
sometimes like, where are you really from? So, because of a multitude of reasons, there are a lot of people moving into the Toe River Valley.
Yes.
A lot of, and there's a variety of reasons. People can't get jobs here, they go away to school, whatever. But there are a lot of people moving in the Toe River Valley, and they need to know local history.
Yes, they do.
They need to know about Professor Mitchell. They need to know about the Civil War years. They need to know about Micah and World War II. They need to know about, all of these other things, that is not easily accessible. And I think about all of the things that we have lost.
Man. Yeah, that's a book in and of itself.
Things that I get a sentence of, and that's all there is. I'll give you an example. There's a story. I was on the board of the Avery Museum for years, and there's a story. A lady came in one time and said there supposedly was a Civil War skirmish in Miller's Gap. Miller's Gap is where you turn off to go to the high school.
Sure.
And when the lady, I knew that sentence. When the lady came in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get the rest of that story.
Never did.
That's all she had. And so that's all I know is that at some point during the war, there was a skirmish, maybe, at Miller's Gap. And that's it. That's all I got of that story. And that may be all that I ever get of that story.
Which high school?
Avery High School.
Avery High School.
And middle school.
So in all your research over the years, and you've been here, as you stated, for about 30 years, and in your book specifically, of the stories in your book, did anything through your research just shock and amaze you and knock you down? Was there anything in particular that's just like, that sticks out?
I don't get shocked too often.
Understood.
So, did you know that the Smithsonian had a solar observatory here in the late 19-teens?
I did not.
Okay.
I knew that they built the lens for the Palomar telescope.
That's a different story.
That's a different story.
A
Okay.
different
All
story.
right.
So I had heard for years that there was a hotel on Hump Mountain up above Elk Park, but I can't find it. And so I'm in the newspapers rooting around. Because if you have a hotel, you're going to advertise it. I can find hotels all over the Toe River Valley in Tennessee and South Carolina newspapers, Virginia newspapers, because I want you to come stay at my hotel, so I'm going to tell you about my hotel by putting it in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay? So I'm in the newspaper rooting around trying to find this hotel on Hump Mountain, which I've still not found. But I find this story about in the late 19-teens that the Smithsonian built a solar observatory on Hump Mountain up above Elk Park. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I start asking people, do you know anything about this? And nobody knows anything about this. Well, I dig into the actual Smithsonian's records, and they were supposed to establish this solar observatory in Chile. But we got this little thing going on called World War I. Mm-hmm. And they are afraid to box up a couple of tons of scientific equipment and put it on a boat and ship it to Chile to establish this observatory. Risky. So they decide to get as far away from their observatory in California as they can. They come here to Hump Mountain, lease a piece of property, build 2 buildings, take up a couple of tons of scientific equipment, and then discover what we have all discovered, that it's cloudy here a lot of days, and it's really hard to get solar observations. But it's up there for about a year, and then they pack it all up and put it on a train and a boat and take it to South America. Mm. So that's...
But it was here.
It was here. I've got their pictures.
They're really?
And I'm trying to get better pictures of it. There are
so
pictures.
That's what everybody thought was the hotel? Or that's what this particular person...
I can't go that far yet.
Okay.
Huh.
That's an ongoing story.
Gotcha.
Likely an encampment of some sort to build and create and monitor it, though, right?
I
mean, well, they had 2 buildings that they constructed. One was a barracks or whatever that they stayed in, and the other was the actual building that had this weird little platform on the top of it that they would get up there and take their readings. So I think the Smithsonian has probably got better pictures than what I've been able to find. It's just trying to find them right now. So that was a late story to make it in the book. I didn't find that until...
That's cool, though. You still finding new stuff, though. You're still finding and covering stuff all the time.
All the time. Wow. So that's one. I would say and this is an ongoing story too, but the Aircraft Warning Service, the spotters and observers during World War II in the Toe River Valley. And a lot of folks will scratch their heads and say, why did we have Aircraft Warning Service this far inland? And the Aircraft Warning Service nationally was an early form of radar. So observers, if you saw an airplane, you would have to go out and if you saw an airplane, there was a form that you filled out, and then you picked up your phone and you told them how many airplanes, which direction they were flying, how many, were they low, were they were high. And you relayed that information to this control center. And if they knew about that airplane, everything was good. If they didn't know about that airplane, they would literally dispatch fighters to go intercept that airplane and figure out what was going on. So what's so important in western North Carolina and East Tennessee? Well, we already talked about the Micah, and if we go across the mountain, we've got Alcoa, we've got the ordnance facility in Kingsport. Well, my grandmother made nylon for parachutes in Elizabethton in World War II.
Yep.
Even though she didn't believe me could jump out of airplanes.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. But there's a lot of war industry going on.
Here,
We've got dams. And then if you go just a little further west, you got the secret city that none of us know anything about, Oak Ridge, where they built part of the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
So that's an ongoing story. That started with a picture that I found of this weird tower in Crossnore. And I asked, Tudor Vance was our mayor then. Of course, he's passed on now. I said, what is this? And he goes, that was the observer's tower in World War II. And that just started me down that path.
Gotcha.
And so I got onto that right before COVID shut everything down. There's a ton of stuff in the governor's papers in Raleigh about civil defense all over the state, but even Toe River Valley stuff, that it's not... It's not well organized. You literally have to just go paper by paper through boxes of stuff.
It's interesting how critical we still are to defense efforts with what you guys make and just over the mountain in Irwin and nuclear fuels. I mean, there's just so much in this 20-mile radius that is critical to national defense.
Well, if you think about it, that was, I don't know if you're familiar with No Work in the Grave. Joanne Thomas Croom.
Okay.
Yeah, she wrote a book about that's part of my family about that, and I've been making my way slowly on that. We'll eventually have her on here, but that book really kind of hits home like how quickly and how much change there was during the transition around here from subsistence farming to like industrialization. It happened. My sense of that book, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but my sense after reading some of that is that happened very quickly here.
Yes.
Like it was a very rapid change, and I would say that it even probably caught some people almost off guard how much it changed.
It did, and there were a lot of people who went away during that time period to work in the war industry. Some of it's, the train ran from Elizabethton to Elk Park and Cranberry until the 1950, and you could get on the work train and you could take that train over and do your defense job and come back. The Micah mining here was hugely important. We've already talked about that. I read someplace one time that even the students at Cross North School were making wooden airplanes that were used by pilots in training.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there needs to be a book just on World War II in the Toe River Valley.
Right.
Not about the men who marched away and the women.
So are you teasing your next book right now?
No. Maybe something in the future.
Yeah.
But the men and women who went away to fight are a fabulous story and did remarkable things.
Agreed.
But we need more about right here in Mitchell and Yancey and Avery in that time period.
It's interesting. It's all interesting stuff. So, God, man, your book covers a lot of ground in your book. So,
I want it to be fun, to be a good read, to be an easy read, and to cover a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
To try and grab people's attentions, or so they know, this is the history of Burnsville. This is who Otway Burns was. This is who Elisha Mitchell was. Just so they get some idea.
Do you have a story that pops out, or favorite story from the book that we've not discussed tonight? Anything?
No, I think we're doing good. I don't want to give too much away.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that.
So go ahead.
Oh, so where can people find your book?
You can visit my website, michaelchardy.com. If you have to, you can go to Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. The Market on Oak has some.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think the Museum Historical Society of Bakersville has some. It's just hitting the newsstand or the stands.
Yeah, it literally just came out last week, right?
Yeah. Officially, September 25th was the official release date. Wow. So I'm not sure who all has it just yet, but it's in multiple places.
Well, let me ask you this question. I got a good one here. So your day job, rather at night job, I guess, is as the director of the Bear Dark Sky Observatory.
I'm one of the directors.
One of the directors.
Yes.
So you spend a lot of time peering into the vastness of space.
Yes.
Yet when you're writing books like this, you're really honing in on one specific area. That seems like a kind of a dichotomy to me. Can you speak to that?
When I work at the observatory, I'm the oldest guy there, and by like 20 years, and B, I'm the history guy. So we're looking through the telescope and we're looking at galaxies and nebula and star clusters and everything. But I'm also telling you about Galileo and Newton and Einstein and Hubble. And, that's the stories we'll talk Greek and Roman mythology because it's vastly important to what we do. But that's
So history and astronomy certainly go hand in hand with one another.
NASA, and all of that. That's, rockets and all of that.
Right.
And I'm not the science guy. I have read a ton of history of science. And I will tell you that we really don't know very much when it comes to all of that out there. We really don't. And what we think we do know is probably wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
The new James Webb Telescope is really showing us that.
God, some of that stuff is mind-blowing, isn't it?
It is. It is. So regardless of where I'm at, I'm going to be talking about history.
Gotcha. So that's your thing.
And it's great. I can't go to the Y and not find somebody that wants to talk history.
Right.
I can't go to church or the post office or the grocery store or Walmart or any of these places.
Gotcha.
And, not find somebody who doesn't want to talk something, about some part of history.
Sure, absolutely. History is a very broad-ranging
It is.
study.
It is.
I mean, it kind of takes you into everything. Maybe this can be the last question. I want Jimmy to come back for this one, but I wonder. We've talked some about nostalgia. We've had a lot of history people on here. We've had Alex Glover talk about the history of the mining or whatever. So we've had a good bit of both, and we've had a lot of local politics and things. And one of the themes that comes up all the time is how much attachment we have to the past, and how automatic nostalgia is a thing that obviously attaches you to your history, where you come from, and all that. But we've hit on a couple times that nostalgia is also something that's oftentimes viewed through rose-colored glasses. Can you speak to that concept? Do you feel like we as humans automatically, especially in our own lives, when we look back at what was or what we had or what our childhood was, how much of that do we automatically view as something that was awesome just because we experienced it and we can look back on it?
Can I kick that back a little further?
Sure.
So I spend...
Hold on. So, Jimmy, I asked him about the nostalgia through rose-colored glasses concept.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
Well, I want to go back further. I spend a couple weekends a month as a volunteer historical interpreter at different historic sites in different time periods. And a lot of times people will come up and say, oh, I wish I lived in the whatever, 1700s, 1800s. And usually my quick answer is one word: penicillin.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, in some aspects, living in the past would have been simpler. But did you know that to survive one winter, you need to cut about 7 cords of firewood a year? And that's for cooking and cleaning.
That's a lot.
Okay. For one cabin, not a very big place.
Yep.
7 cords of firewood a year.
Yep.
Okay. And, I talk about the Civil War years. There aren't any stores. You don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't grow it, then you're not going to get it. And in some of those years, I think it was 63, winter of 63, or the year of 1863, it was so cold that there was frost on the top of every mountain in July. So how can you grow food?
Yeah,
when there's frost in July.
When there's frost on the Blacks and the Rhone and Grandfather, I mean, you're going to be hungry.
Yeah, And
Yeah.
remember, those 7 cords of wood, they ain't no chainsaws either.
No, there's no chainsaws.
There's no power tools.
No.
There's
It's,
none
it's
of
all
that
right
stuff.
here.
So this was a hard life here.
So life is hard, and we want to say the good old days were better. That and in some aspects it was. When the train, if we go back 50, 60 years, we had passenger service. We could get on that train. I don't remember exact years when it ended, but we could get on that train and go any place in the United States. We could get on the train in Spruce Pine and go any place in the United States served by passenger service. We can't do that anymore.
Right.
That's a misstep nationally. I will tell you,
Drastic
it's a huge
misstep.
I
misstep.
think it is too.
I can't wait for Asheville to get the Amtrak connector over to Charlotte and Raleigh. It's coming theoretically next. I look at my watch like it's going to be soon, but
Next
That's
15 minutes.
yeah,
it's coming-
exactly. But
Coming at 11.
whenever I'm traveling for business up north, like if I get to Philly, DC, anywhere up there, everything else I do is from the train.
Yeah.
And if you plan ahead, you can do so much. And I make a lot of phone calls. Just being able to make phone calls and have electricity and
Yeah.
it's so convenient. Public transportation would be nice. And we hear this all the time around here. Everybody's like, Spruce Pine needs to open up a train to go. Well, we can't open up the train. We don't own the lines. It's not anything that we can do.
We can't even get the old depot to turn into a museum.
No, we can't.
And that would
We
be a
can't.
great museum.
Yeah.
Or we'd eat their front of their property a
No.
lot of the times.
So, yeah, certain things in the past were better. You know, there were more stores and shops in Spruce Pine.
Right.
You know, and that was great. You know, you could go down there and take care of what you needed. You know, today we don't have that many stores and shops.
Right.
We've got to order everything. Which part of it that goes back 100 years with Sears and
I was going
Roebuck.
to say Sears and Roebuck modern style.
Yeah,
What a misstep they made. That's another story.
that's
But
another story.
They should have been Amazon.
They should have been. They were. For
They were. They just
100
they
years.
just moved the catalog to the internet. If they'd done that, you could buy a house on Sears.
Yeah.
You know, I read when I was working on the research for the book. I read that, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I read that you could order a hospital from Sears.
I don't doubt that at all.
Now, I can't back that up because
No.
I tried to kind of research that out, and then after a couple of days, I'm like, oh, this is not what I need to be working on.
Right.
I mean, technically, the original Crossnor Hospital may have come from Sears because it was very small.
It was. Yeah, some things in the past were better.
Right.
But you're not going to want that life
Yeah.
because it
Right.
is so hard to get up and have to farm for everything, to grow enough to buy the things that you can't produce on your farm, like coffee and sugar. It's a trade-off. It took me 30-ish minutes to get here, 25 minutes to get here, and 100 years ago, it would have taken a good day. And if I'd have taken the train, I would have had to have left my house and taken the train to Johnson City
Right.
and got on another train and brought that other train here.
And you had a window of time to do that. It wasn't at your schedule.
That's
it was
right.
at the train schedule.
That's
I'm
right.
glad that that's your answer because it's been my contention for a minute that nostalgia is bullshit, and people do. I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that people look back and they see a time. Well, it was simpler years ago, sure, because you were a child, you had no responsibilities.
Yeah.
You had
The time in your memory was
Yes.
simpler.
Yes,
your
it was.
your liabilities, your personal
Right.
responsibilities were simpler.
But-
the times in general were not.
no life was way more complicated then. I mean,
And-
no
and what-
indoor plumbing, no electricity, no internet.
What time period do you want me to pick? World War
Exactly.
One, the
Exactly.
Great Depression,
Right.
World War Two, Vietnam with all the race riots
Right.
in the 1960s.
Oh, dude, I freak out if
The
the
Cuban
internet
Missile
goes
Crisis.
out.
Right.
Like, I mean,
I'm okay when the internet goes out.
my entire life is ran by the internet.
The energy crisis in the late 70s under
Yeah.
Carter's era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, which we're seeing a lot of similarities to.
the
now.
high interest rates and the lack of gas.
A lot of parallels.
9/11.
9/11.
Yeah.
That was just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Feels like it, doesn't it?
Feels like it.
So it's great to look at the past like that, but it's unrealistic.
I agree. Could not agree more. You got to move forward. It's just like business. You're either growing or you're shrinking. There's
Yeah.
no in between.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, you can be stagnant, but then you start to decline
Exactly.
after you hit that stagnant point.
Exactly. It's interesting. You mentioned earlier about the Palomar telescope lens. I'm pretty sure it was Shannon Stewart. I think her married name's Ledford. I think her granddad helped sculpt that lens, if I'm not mistaken. She
now the
she
lens-
works at the mines today.
Okay.
Yeah.
She helped get the material because
Yes.
it was sculpted somewhere else because they had
Yes.
to finish. We didn't have the materials, but he extracted that whole piece.
So they
to go out
took
there.
4 train car loads of feldspar out of the mine, which I write about. It's in my book. The name of the mine is in the book. Chestnut Flat Mine.
Yeah.
and they take it to Irwin where it is ground, and then they put it on another train to take it to New York where Corning actually make the mirror. Corningware
people.
yes, actually make the mirror.
Oh, wow,
itself.
that's cool.
And then it took something like 2 years or a year for it to cool, and then World War II.
Really?
Yeah, World War II happens, and they don't get it shipped to California until a couple of years after the war ends.
Couple years to cool.
Yeah.
People were a lot more patient back in the day. I got a final question. Is that all right? You guys got anything?
No, go ahead.
Nothing right now.
If you had to look back, you obviously studied a ton of history. What advice? We're creating our own history right now, right as we speak. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to people in general about how to live your life or to make an impression on your community to make sure that we're remembered in history? I guess what have you learned in your studies of history when it comes to making your own?
I think I've already said this in probably multiple ways. We know so little about history in general. And that's more evident every day I dig and research. I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. How did I not know that? We're doing a horrible job of transmitting what we know to the next generation. Mm-hmm. I mean, a horrible job. And I actually pulled something up. So back in May of 2023, the National Assessment of Educational Progress came out with their new numbers. According to this national survey, only 13% of students scored proficient in American history.
That's a travesty.
Okay.
Wow.
13%.
That's because we like to tear it down and pretend like it didn't exist these days.
And that's down. In 2018, the last time they did that test, it was 34%.
That's a huge decrease.
Wow.
We need
That
more
was a
Shirley
bad
Heises.
number then.
34%
No
to
kidding.
13%.
Rest in peace, Shirley, man. I'm telling you.
And that is just, I mean, we are so historically illiterate. And we have been for a generation. And that's why I do what I do, is to try and get that information, to make it accessible. I've said that earlier too when we first started, is trying to make history accessible. Do you know the last book before this one that covered the whole Tover Valley that was not a family history?
Don't say like 47 or 53, something like that.
Cabins in the Laurel.
Oh, man.
In the 1930s.
Wow.
So we got tons of family history out there, which is great. That's awesome.
Right.
Don't believe everything your family writes.
I was going
or
to say
says.
that's so subjective, though.
I always heard this story, and my grandmother always told me that her brother Albert played with the Carters. I thought that was cool. He was playing with the Carter family.
Right.
They were little kids, and he would play with their kids. He was little, and they were little.
Actually, playing, not playing.
Yeah. So I thought, wow, my Uncle Albert played with the Carter. That's pretty cool. He was a kid, and they were kids, and he went out and played. And so, A, don't believe everything your family has to say. But B, we know so little.
Yeah.
There's this service out there where you can, you order the service, and the service asks you questions, and at the end of the year, those questions end up you're telling your life story and making a book, and it's as a service. And I'll tell you, it's an amazing thing. And I would encourage everybody to do that for your families, to do all that. But along those lines, and I don't know if the historical societies in each respective county does that, but it does seem like there should be a goal for them to somehow make it a mission for someone to record the events that year at some level, like minutes for the county or something. And I don't mean to throw the Historical Society under the bus, but if it seems like that should be their mission, to somehow capture that information.
And it would be awesome if they did. But having worked,
they don't have the resources.
No, having worked with the Yancey Group and the Avery Group, I've been on both of their boards. They operate on shoestrings.
Oh yeah.
And most people don't know they exist.
Yeah, that's true.
So I was at McDonald's in Newland getting coffee one time, and the young lady there asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Working at a museum." She's like, "We have a museum." And, Avery's Museum opened in 1976 during the bicentennial. And she didn't know literally I was 3 blocks from the museum. So there are people, I actually counted, I don't remember now. There are like 9 museums in the Toe River Valley. There's Yancey there in Burnsville. There's the museum there on the top of Mount Mitchell. Mm-hmm. There's the Mitchell County Historical Society. There's the Mineral Museum. There's the Avery Museum in Newland. There's the Banner House, the Beach Mountain Museum, and there's a tractor museum in Pinola. Mm-hmm. And then there's Grandfather Mountain. So I don't know if that was 9 or not. I wasn't counting.
Close.
But,
close enough.
Most people, they don't know we have any museums. Most people who grew up here
don't have a clue.
Don't have a clue.
I only know of one museum here, and it's like going towards Marion, I believe, from this road. I think it's
the Mineral Museum.
Yeah. I've been to that one. I took a field trip to that one time, and I cut my finger open. That's how I remember it.
Well, at least you got something out of
That's
it.
right.
Tetanus.
And so, that's right, tetanus. Penicillin.
Back to penicillin.
Back to
It all
penicillin.
comes back to penicillin.
But, we do a horrible job. We do a horrible job as parents, grandparents, citizens, school teachers, across the board.
It's so frustrating because we are in the age of the easiest communication. I can call my friends in Japan, the Netherlands, wherever right now in near real time. We have the easiest method to communicate, and we say nothing 1,000,000 times more than we say anything of value.
Yeah.
Yep.
God, so true though. Mm-hmm. And you wonder, there's this attack on history too that you see that anything that's not convenient to our current sensibilities or our so-called modern sensibilities. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything that's not convenient, we just erase from history.
Yeah.
And I hate to go back to this, but even during the George Floyd riots and what we lost during those, and I understand. I get it. But at the same time, like, if you don't learn from history, especially the negative parts of history, in my view, you're doomed to repeat it.
Well, we never learn.
No, I don't think
Never learned to begin with.
We never learn. We're going to repeat it.
So it's a cyclical thing, for sure.
Is. Oh, yeah.
So that's right. Spruce Pine's coming back, baby.
Was it Mark Twain said history doesn't rhyme, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes or something?
Yeah.
I always take issue with that. Bring Spruce Pine back to its former glory. I was raised a cop's kid. It was not any more glorious back in the 70s and 80s than it is now. We had more retail shops available. There's more discretionary dollars local because people didn't travel as much because there were local jobs that kept you here.
Yes.
But I will tell you, the violence, the drugs, all that was persistent then.
Yeah, it was
Almost worse.
Yeah.
At times, yes.
If you depending on where you were at, there was no former glory. This is just it. This is life.
Well, they want to bring it back to their childhood where they didn't have to worry about
That's
things.
back to the delusion.
I want Spruce Pine to be great.
We all do.
Yeah.
I want Newland and Burnsville to.
I want it all to be
I
great.
want it to be great. But we're not going back.
No.
Never.
We've got to figure out.
That's exactly what we always talk about.
We've got to make that next step to figure out what's next.
Yeah, I agree.
And what can we do to, provide jobs? Because we don't have a lot of jobs.
We don't. We don't.
And we never did. We never did.
We never did. Back to that, way back we started this conversation. I won't keep this on forever, but it's hard to live in these mountains.
Yeah, it always
has been.
Yeah.
And even if we brought a new manufacturing facility right up here at the top of the hill, getting products that you make here off this mountain is hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the geography of the area.
It's hard.
a challenge, yeah.
That's it. And to be honest with you, we should embrace that. This is a unique area. And I mean, things are hard and things are difficult, but we can embrace a future that still looks bright, but is realistic in what we can have,
Well, I'll say the same thing about tourism. Tourists came first. Mm-hmm. Who was Daniel Boone?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, he was here hunting and fishing and hiking long before any of y'all's families ever showed up here in these mountains. And if you look at when Bishop Spangberg came, he was so lost, he didn't know where he was, and he ran into a group of hunters who showed him how to get out of the mountains. And so, people come down on tourism. Well, the tourists were here first.
They were.
That's a good point.
My family's from Snow Camp Society of Friends. Quakers is where my family's from, and we ended up here only because Dad got stationed here as a trooper.
Yeah.
So he's from the Piedmont, well, actually Indiana/Piedmont. Long story, but
nobody's family in the grand scope of history has been here very long.
No,
if we go to Salem, Massachusetts, okay, there are houses there that date to the mid 1600s. We don't have that here.
No,
right.
Nobody's family has really been here longer than about 240 years.
And I'll tell you,
Right.
1600s ain't that long ago either.
No.
Well, and we think 240 years, but how many generations is that? Only like what?
That's math.
6.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a very high number,
Right.
So it's not like you're talking about some where we have these deep roots here. I mean, we do, but there's not just simply not a long enough time span to do it.
No, the place that your family came from in Ireland, they'd been there 1,000 years,
Shoot, yeah.
or Scotland, or wherever.
I'm Spanish, so. But
Well, to go back to what you said earlier about, 6 generations. I saw in the chat earlier they were talking about, or somebody had mentioned how, maybe morals were better back then. I mean, 6 generations ago, we were burning people for being witches.
We never actually did that.
Really?
No.
Salem, Massachusetts?
They never burned anyone.
Okay, cool.
They did hang some of
they
them.
hung them. I was going to say,
Hung
how did
them.
they execute them?
But we never burned anybody.
Well, that's good.
Not
that's
fast enough.
ergot
British
poisoning
thing,
caused that too, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I know,
So Joe Rogan told me.
let's see.
So the Salem witch trials didn't actually involve burning people.
No.
Well, that makes sense because witches weren't really made of wood, and you couldn't build a bridge out of that.
But no,
Well, it also
Monty
floats.
Python reference there. Sorry.
Duck! Murder!
so the better moral thing. I mean, how many of us have done the DNA thing and discovered we're not related to who we thought we were?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not changed. We know more about it because we have access to internet and whatever else.
See, I agree 100% with
but
that.
people were, I mean, if you go back and look at the old church records and people that got churched for, bastard children or making liquor or whatever.
Yeah.
And going back to kind of like morals, after all that happened, then we had Civil War, the 2 World Wars, and we just kept murdering each other for a good.
Oh, we still are.
We still
Yeah.
are.
doing
Now we
that.
do it without wars.
Yeah, we just do it
Now we just do it when we go into recession.
with remote controls.
Right,
We
and with
do
a
it
remote
by
control.
control.
Yeah. So
we don't change.
Yeah.
True.
I agree.
And so we just, if you study history long enough, we don't. In fact, I would say sometimes it's funny. I say that Darwin had it wrong. We're de-evolving. Instead of evolving, we're de-evolving.
Convenience does that.
Backwards.
Convenience.
But we're
does
just
that.
more aware. I mean,
Yeah, we are.
100 years ago, if your local or regional newspaper did not report that 17 people died in Chicago over the weekend, you never would have known that.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
you think back to the 1990s, pre-90s, kids just did whatever. They were walking to school by themselves, and then cable TV became a thing, and everyone became this stranger danger became a thing, and that was largely due to cable TV.
and that disconnects us, and then here comes along the internet, and that gives you another reason to stay inside and not talk to anybody.
Fear.
Yeah, it's hard. I will say that I do see a resurgence, and I'm curious if you do as well. I do see a resurgence of history, like buffs and things online. There's a lot of history stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
There is, and that's I read continuously.
Right.
But if I'm not reading, I have 2 or 3 channels that I watch. The History Guy, History Underground, Mark Felton Productions. But I'm watching stuff that I don't really read. I don't read much about World War II, but I watch stuff about World War II.
You ever listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin's World is one that I listen to.
Yeah.
Civil War Talk Radio, which I've been on. I listen to that. But, and that's great. When I travel, I download half a dozen podcasts.
Right.
And history, and they're all history or science, or history of science.
Well, golly, and it's such an unbelievable resource. I've learned so much, man.
It is. Mm-hmm. And it's all out there at our fingertips.
Yeah. We have no excuse.
And yet, only 13% of high school students are proficient in history.
I'm happy to say that it's encouraging that this little podcast in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, has had 2 authors on in the last 2 weeks from here writing books today.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So I will say that it is encouraging with the statistic that you gave that people are starting to do their part, even here. And I believe in scale, so I have to believe this is happening a lot of places. People are publishing stuff. So kudos on you, man. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I've not read it.
Oh, you got to, dude.
I can't wait.
It's right up your alley,
I'm
dude.
sure. I'm sure. I'm that nerd who knows why Altapass is called Altapass, why Ledger is called Ledger, why Kona is called Kona.
Me and Jimmy also have a standing appointment to go find the original Spruce Pine, and I know
as soon as the leaves drop,
I know where
snakes,
it's at. I've been there.
No offense, and the snakes are gone, then we'll go get it.
I mean, I'll just go and take my snake hook and bring some friends home.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. We can make it work. We'll just integrate it all.
You know what? We need to do that. We need to
collector strikes again.
here in about 3 weeks. We need to have a live remote recording of us finding the sign. Which, by the way, and you probably know about spruce pine was named incorrectly because the tree that he said that's as strong as that spruce pine over there was not a spruce pine tree.
No, it wasn't.
Pretty sure it's a hemlock. So,
Yeah, I think it was a hemlock. Which it may not even be there, but the plaque's probably there.
Yeah, spruce pine's named after the wrong tree. Back to its former glory of being the wrong thing.
Wow. Well, Michael, goodness gracious, dude, we could sit here and do this all night. I asked the last question like 30 minutes ago.
That's
so
okay.
So no, I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being here,
it's
man.
been awesome.
This is awesome. We should definitely do it again. And man, again, just remind us where we can go find the book and your other books as well.
So you can visit my website, michaelchardy.com. It's got all of my books, published books on there, and or Market on Oak. I would recommend buying locally.
Sure.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen to that.
And if at all possible, Amazon messes us up left and right.
Right.
Hold it up, Chase, for the camera so
Yes,
folks
absolutely.
can see what to find there and get it out. So
Hidden History of the Tober Valley.
I will be at the Old Timey Days in Burnsville on Saturday.
I was going to ask if you had a book signing coming up anytime soon.
And then they're doing a festival in Spruce Pine on that second Saturday in October. I think it's the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following Saturday, I should be at the Apple Butter Festival in...
Yeah, the Mountaineer
Nice.
Festival, Harley,
Yes.
with Harley Masters
Yep.
and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
So-
That's awesome. Well, Josh, take us out of here, brother.
Alrighty. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Sorry I've been a little out of it. I've had vertigo all day today, so that's kind of zapped me. But, I know, right? Man, I'll just projectile vomit. No, I'm feeling a little bit better. Again, Michael, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Please share this video far and wide. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Visit our store, shophollercast.com. We have all kinds of cool merch that really helps us keep the lights on here and pay our production team that is one person. But
Heyo.
he does a
Lacey's
fabulous
getting
job.
paid.
you know what?
though.
Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah,
You
dude,
really do.
awesome.
absolutely.
Round
Yeah,
of
let's go.
applause.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Let's
so
go.
much.